let's get into the word here, and we'll begin with prayer. So let's all fold our hands. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the riches of this season. We thank you for the harvest that we may gather, the fruit of the land, that we may receive our daily bread. We ask your strength as we rake our leaves and prepare for the coming cold season. Please watch over Alexa and her family. Please heal her and bring her back to full health and strength. And bless their family as they tend to her and to the kids. Bless all of us, Father, in our illnesses, in our sickness, and in our sorrows. Please uphold us, protect us from getting sick, protect us from this pandemic, and may this pandemic pass from us quickly. Bless us now as we look to your word, as we seek you where you desire to be found. In the promise that you've given to us in the scriptures. Help us to hear your voice, the voice of our shepherd and your son as well. In his name we pray. Amen. So we're going to look at the second chapter of 1 John. Last week we got through the end of the first chapter. And so here we are in the second chapter, in the first verse, where John says, "My little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous." Now, just going through this bit by bit, wonderful that John speaks to his congregation and to us as little children. Now, partly there's just a bit of biographical information here. We assume now that John is writing this at the end of his life. So he is a true elder in the church, writing to people who, to all of him, everyone is their children. This reminds me of that movie, Grumpy Old Men. If you remember that movie, Grumpy Old Men, those two old guys. And one of them, I don't remember, one of those two old guys, his dad was still living, and who was a really old man, and at one point the grumpy old men are arguing back and forth. And the dad says, "You're just a couple of kids," I mean, when you've attained a certain maturity in life, you can look at everyone and they are all children to you. Well, that's John. But now this is a term of affection that John is speaking to his congregation with this kind of affection. All of us as Christians, regardless of our age, no matter how many gray hairs we have, we all want to be as children before God. Jesus says that this is how we will enter the kingdom, is as children. That is, we are not masters of our own eternal fate. We are children, all of us, held in the arms of our Father. So this is I would say, both a commentary on John's, his own position in life now, but also a theological point that we are children before the Father. And he says now, John says, he's writing these things to you so that you may not sin. This is such an interesting dynamic that's at work in this epistle. And this has been going on now since the first chapter, where John says those words that we repeat every Sunday. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he who is faithful and just will forgive our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So it's a strong statement about our own human sinfulness, but also a strong statement about God's grace. But John, like all of the apostles, they always have to try to clarify this. Paul does the same thing, where he'll say, "You have been forgiven by Christ. We are sinners who have been forgiven by Christ, but nonetheless, this is not supposed to be an excuse for us to go on sinning." Paul has to clarify this himself because he was misunderstood on this point. As if God's grace were simply permission to go out and sin so that we could somehow have more grace. And John now is going to clarify that same point. He does not want us to sin. He wants us to fight against sin, to listen to God's commands, to pay attention to God's calling in our lives, and pay attention to the devil and his temptations, pay attention to our own sinful, weak flesh, and how we all so easily listen to the devil, give in to his call. So John is going to strengthen strengthen our own fight now against sin. So he's saying, I'm writing this to you. He's writing to sinners to say, do not sin, all right? Fight against this. But then, of course, following it right up with that word of comfort and the Christian gospel. But if anyone does sin, he says, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He uses this word advocate. This is the same word that we find in John's gospel, where Jesus uses this word to speak about the Holy Spirit as our advocate with God, the Paraclete, the one who speaks in our behalf. He is our defense attorney before God. We know that, and now John is applying this not to the Spirit specifically, but to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is our advocate. We know that Jesus has ascended into heaven. He sits at the right hand of the Father, and he sits there as our advocate, as our friend, who speaks in our behalf. So, John, on the one hand, he says, I don't want you to sin. Don't sin. But then he says, now, when you do sin, if anyone does sin, and he's already made clear that's all of us. If anyone does sin, we have an advocate, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. And then he says, now verse 2, and he is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. That word atonement, the word atoning sacrifice, this is really nice because I love this word and how this comes in English, that Jesus is the atonement. That word in English literally comes from putting these words together at one. That is, Jesus makes us at one with the Father. So in English, it's atonement. Or the King James used the word propitiation. But it simply means the same thing. It's the thing that puts us together with God. And so that's Jesus. He's the one who has put us together with God by his death, and reconciling us to God, and which we needed. We needed this reconciliation because of our sins. And now John really flings these doors wide open. He says that this is not just for us. This is not a secret little club of forgiveness, but that Jesus has done this for the sins of the whole world. And I would say this once again, we have John is striking against the false teaching of the Gnostics. This is not just a secret little community, not a secret a society, but Jesus has done this for the whole world, and so we can announce this to the whole world. And John, this is just so good now because John leaves us no wiggle room to get away from God's grace. We cannot say, well, he was just writing to the Christians of the first century. He was just writing to his own congregation. This doesn't apply to me. No, John says Jesus did this for the sins of the whole world. And so you cannot wiggle out of this. You cannot, you can't say this just belongs to the people of the first century or just belongs to my neighbor or something like that. You are one of the world. You are a sinner in the world. And you are also a recipient of God's grace in the world. John just put this wide open for us. This belongs to you. Look around. If you're still in this world, and boy, we sure know we're in this world. And this world drives us crazy. Every morning we get our Star Tribune. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and every morning we sit around and read our newspaper, and we get reminders every day we're in this world with all its craziness. But now John is going to use this as good news. Yeah, you're in this world with all of its craziness, but this is the world that Jesus died for, the world with all of its sins. Jesus died for this world, and that includes you. So again, John says, I don't want you to sin. Don't take this as permission to go out now and really show how great God is, because I'm just going to really prove how big of a sinner I can be to show how forgiving God is. John does not want that. But he says, now when you do sin, you have a place to go. You have a refuge that you can run to. That is the grace of God. So now in the third verse, John says, now by this we may be sure that we know him, if we obey his commandments. And I'm going to read this now. These verses really go together, and I'm going to read them as a unit now, and then we'll break them down verse by verse. But again, verse 3, now by this we may be sure that we know him if we obey his commandments. Whoever says, I have come to know him, but does not obey his commandments, is a liar. And in such a person the truth does not exist. But whoever obeys his word, truly in this person the love of God has reached perfection. By this we may be sure that we are in him. Whoever says, I abide in him, ought to walk just as he walked. All right, so now this is John amplifying what he said back in that first verse. All right, he does not want us to sin. He wants us to listen to the commandments of Jesus Christ. Now, so I need to make several comments about this. One is that this is the same John, all right, who wrote the Gospel of John. And I want to read you something from the Gospel of John. And you can look at this if you want to or just listen. But it's back in the first chapter of John's Gospel, this beautiful prologue. And we've commented how much we love these words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is John speaking about Jesus Christ, who is God's Word in the flesh. And I'm going to jump ahead in that first chapter of the Gospel to verse 14, where John says, and the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John the Baptist testified to him and cried out, this was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. That is such an important verse. And I would say if any of you are doing the 2020 challenge right now, reading through the New Testament, this is just a verse to imprint on your forehead, imprint in your memory. Again, the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Jesus is not Moses. This was not why God sent his Son into the world, just to give us laws and commandments. Moses did a very good job of that. Moses was a very good lawgiver. He gave us commandments. And even though he gave those commandments specifically to the Jews, really we can find the wonderful truth in those commandments and how they can apply to all of us. You know, the 10 Commandments were given to the Jews at the foot of Mount Sinai, but nonetheless, we can read those commandments and find that there is truth in there that applies to all people. All of us should worship God alone. All of us should use God's name for prayer and not to swear. All of us should take a day off and go to church. All of us should honor our parents and so forth. And Moses did that very well. And again, this is not why Jesus was sent into the world. Jesus was not given to us simply to bring us more commandments. That's John's point in the gospel, that Jesus came to bring something else, namely grace and truth. Now, having said all of that, we can also see, whether it's in John's gospel or in this epistle of John, that Jesus does give us commandments. That's not his primary purpose in coming, but nonetheless, he does want his people to live a certain way. And you can really see this in John's gospel on the night in which he was betrayed. John, in his gospel, does not give us the same description of the Lord's Supper that you find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But on that same night, John gives us something special. He tells us about how Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And I'm going to jump also now again in John's gospel to the 13th chapter. Again, you don't have to turn to this if you don't want to, but it's in John 13, verse 34, where Jesus has washed the disciples' feet. And then he says to them, I give you, this is verse 34, he says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So Jesus is giving this new commandment. Now, this is not the first time that God has told us to love each other, but this is what's new about it, is that Jesus is going to define this love by his own death for the disciples and for us, for the world. This is the new thing, is that now this love has become manifest. It's visible in a way that we can see it in Jesus's own, in his own person, his own body, his own action of dying on the cross. That Jesus defines that love by dying for his disciples, which means dying for the same people who are betraying him, denying him, running away from him in his hour of need. This is Jesus defining what kind of love he asks from us. So again, the commandment to love is very old, but now Jesus defines it in a new way for us, in a way that we can see. And he gave his disciples an example of that by washing their feet. And we now follow his example, not necessarily by literally washing someone's feet, although there are people, nurses and others who literally wash feet as part of their loving service to their neighbor. But all of us love our neighbors in ways that are, just like foot washing. Foot washing is a humble task. It can be humiliating to have to do something that you don't want to do. This isn't what I signed up for. In the same way that you might say that about washing someone's feet, Jesus asks us to do loving service for our neighbors in ways that I didn't want to do this. I didn't sign up for this. This isn't my job. Jesus calls us to do those things which are humbling. And so Jesus gives us this commandment. Again, Jesus is not Moses. He came to bring us the love of God through his death on the cross, to bring us atonement, that at-one-ment. But our Lord certainly wants us to live certain ways. And so he'll tell us that. And he says even that this is part of our witness. This comes up again in the 13th chapter of the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples. This is part of our Christian witness, that our love for one another. And this is why we have that old camp song, they will know we are Christians by our love. They'll know that we belong to Christ because we show the same love that he showed to us. And so now back to the epistle of John now, the second chapter, where John says, by this we may be sure that we know him if we obey his commandments. So again, Jesus does give us commandments. And I want to point out now, there's this word in that third verse, and it actually comes up 3 times in this little paragraph, that word obey. The Greek word is tereo, which you don't have to remember that, but that word now comes up 3 times in this little paragraph, and it's a great word. You could circle that word. It might be translated as obey or keep. That's how the King James translate it: obey his commandments or keep his commandments. That word is it can be translated a few different ways. I think it is fun to pay attention to that. Let me give you a few ways that this word's translated. Sometimes it's translated as keep or watch or guard. All right. And again, the NRSV uses the word obey. But I think there's a little bit more going on with this word than simple obedience. Now, certainly we should obey the commandments of God. But again, there's something more to this word going on. And let me just give you a few examples of how this word gets used in the New Testament, this Greek word tereo. The guards at the tomb had the job of tereoing Jesus. They were given the job to make sure he doesn't come out of there. Guard that tomb. When they bury Jesus, you watch that tomb now very closely and make sure he doesn't come out of there. All right. Now, obviously, they weren't up to the task. God was bigger than and more powerful than anything they could have done. And so their attempt to guard Jesus did not work. But they had the job of guarding him. Now it's interesting. This word also comes up in the Gospel of John in the 2nd chapter, where Jesus does his first miracle. And what was Jesus' first miracle? He turned water into wine at the wedding at Cana. And after he does that, after Jesus turns this water into wine, remember the steward of the wedding, the guy who's supposed to be overseeing this wedding party, this wedding reception, he comes up to Jesus and he's perplexed that Jesus has done this. And specifically what perplexes him, what really kind of befuddles him, is he says, Jesus, you have kept the good wine until now. He says, why? Nobody does this. He says, you're always supposed to serve the good stuff first, and then when the guests have become drunk and they can't tell, the boxed wine from the bottled wine, then you bring out the cheap stuff. And he says, but you save this good stuff till now. There's that word again, tereo. You have kept the good wine till now. You've been guarding it. You've been holding on to that good stuff till now. And so I draw that to our attention because that the word, it means it can mean that you're holding on to something that's very precious, that's very good, like the good wine. And at times this word will be used in the sense of keeping a commandment, that is, obeying it. But this word will also mean that we are keeping and holding on to God's word, not in the sense of obeying a commandment, but rather holding on to the precious gospel that brings us salvation. And so this word can be used in these different ways. Again, to obey a commandment, or to hold on to the word of Christ, which gives us life. And again, what gives us life is not Jesus, sort of playing the part of Moses. All right, that's what John was telling us in his gospel. What gives us life is this promise of forgiveness that Jesus gives to us from the cross. So now, in this epistle, verse 3, John says, by this we may be sure that we know him, if we obey his commandments, if we hold on to those commandments. Just like Jesus himself said, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Obeying Jesus' commandments, keeping his commandments, guarding his commandments is a witness to the world and also to ourselves. Now think about that. Again, Jesus really was speaking about the ways that our love is a witness to the world. They will know we are Christians by our love. But now John is saying that this is even going to testify to ourselves, and we can reassure ourselves in this way. We may be sure that we know him if we keep his commandments. If we let go of his commandments, well, that obviously means we don't think that highly of Jesus or what he tells us if we ignore his commandments to us. It's I would say similar to to a family life where children they demonstrate their love for their parents by listening to them, by helping rake the leaves. Children help out in this way. There's a way to demonstrate that they do love their mom and dad. If a kid just ignores their parents, blows their parents off, well, they're showing the world and themselves that they don't think that highly of their parents. So John says, keep his commandments. Again, they'll be a witness to others, but it'll also be a witness to you that Jesus matters. So at verse 4 now, whoever says, I have come to know him, but does not obey his commandments, is a liar. And in such a person, the truth does not exist. All right, if we love Jesus, well, then certainly his promise of forgiveness matters, but also his commandments matter to us. We take those seriously. Again, Jesus is not Moses. This was not the primary reason he came into the world, but he loves us so much that he died for us, and he also loves us so much that he tells us how to live. Because he doesn't want to see us living in sin. He doesn't want to see us hurting one another. He loves us too much to let us hurt one another. So John says, pay attention to that. Listen to that. Follow it. Keep it. His commandments are precious. Certainly his promise of forgiveness is precious, but so are his commandments. And if you say you love Jesus, but you hate people, you're a liar. You're not listening to Jesus. And then And then in verse 5, he says, but whoever obeys his word, truly in this person the love of God has reached perfection. Now, I want to say I'm not a big fan of how the NRSV translates this right here, because again, this word tereo can mean all these different things. It can mean obey, and that's how John has been using it now in the last couple verses. But again, it also means keep, guard, watch, hold on to something that's precious. And now John he's sort of turning a corner. All right, in verse 5 now, notice this. He used that same word, obey or keep, tereo, but now he uses a different word. In the last couple verses, it was in verse 3, obey his commandments. Verse 4, it was obey his commandments. But now verse 5, he used something else, obey his word. All right, obey or keep his word. And again, that word includes the commandments to love. It includes that law. But his word is bigger than that. His word is not only do this, but his word is also, Jesus says, I have done this for you. Jesus' word is this promise of life and grace. So now John is saying not only keep the word or keep the commandment, obey the commandment, but he's saying keep the whole word of Jesus Christ. Everything he has said to you, hold on to it. And that when we care about the word of Jesus Christ, what he has said to us, both its command but also in its promise, when we hold on to that, truly, John says, in this person, the love of God has reached perfection. The perfection as in this is the whole goal of what God is doing with us. He has loved us, and the fruit of that is that we love one another. He is making, we are sick trees. I mean, you've all seen what it looks like when a tree is sick, when it doesn't grow anything, eventually dies. God has taken us, sick, dead trees, and he's given us new life, so that now the leaves turn green, the fruit grows on us as trees, the fruit of the Spirit. And so John is saying this is perfection in us, when God makes us to grow fruit. Then he says, verse 5 still, he says, by this we may be sure that we are in him. Whoever says, I abide in him, ought to walk just as he walked. And so our lives become a witness both to the world and to ourselves, that the love that we have for our neighbors will declare the love that we have for Christ. If we love Christ, we'll walk as he walked. Now again, I mean, immediately having said that, you might think, but I haven't walked. I haven't been so loving. Well, again, go back to where John began this chapter. If anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous. And then, having found Jesus and his atonement, his forgiveness. Now, we're going to continue to listen to Jesus, both in his promise of forgiveness and when he turns us to our neighbor and says, "There, okay, I have forgiven you. Now, there's one right there for you to forgive." This is just like that king that we heard about in the parable a few weeks ago, who forgave 10,000 talents, and then expected that same servant to show forgiveness to the people around him. And of course, that forgiveness from that servant to his fellow servants is small compared to the eternal great forgiveness that Jesus has given to us. But nonetheless, God says, hey, come on now. If I've given you all of this, please be patient with your neighbors. If I've been patient with you, please be patient with your spouse. If I've been generous to you, please be generous to your fellow church members. And so now again, John, he will not let us use God's grace as an excuse. But now it says that once you've been forgiven by Christ, you will find yourself in this world with people to care for. So go ahead and care for them. And I'm just going to move ahead a little ways now into this next verse, verse 7, where John says, brothers or beloved, in the NRSV, beloved, I am writing you no new commandment, but an old commandment that you have had from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. John, now I'd say this is again, John is striking against the Gnostics. All right, this isn't some new fancy knowledge that I'm giving to you. This isn't a secret. This isn't a new commandment. This is an old commandment. And really, this is striking against all heresy. I mean, all heresy, the false teaching in the church, always claims to have something new about it. I really got something new. You never heard this before. And John is saying, no, this isn't new. This is the old word that has been preached from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. Now, it is interesting because Jesus, if we were to go back and look in the 13th chapter of John, again, after he washes the disciples' feet, Jesus does call it a new commandment. Because, again, it's the old commandment of loving your neighbor. But Jesus now defines it in a new way. I mean, it is his suffering and death for us that really defines the commandment. And in that sense, it's new. I mean, we've never seen God in the flesh until now, until Jesus. So in that sense, it's new. But again, what John is saying, it's not new. That is, John is not trying to impress us with some kind of new fancy teaching. This is the one that came from God from the beginning, that you have heard from the beginning. The old commandment is the word that you have heard. And then in verse 8, he says, yet I am writing you a new commandment that is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. So he's following that same line of reasoning that Jesus was using. Okay, this is an old commandment. I'm not trying to impress you with some new fandangled teaching, but this is a new commandment because it's true in Christ and in you. This is what makes it new. Is that Christ has shown us this love, this commandment. He has demonstrated, he put it into practice in his own suffering and death. That's what's new about it, again, is that we can finally see this. And it's new because now it's at work in you, John says. All right, that's what's also new, is that God, again, has taken old, dead, sick trees, and he's made them come to life so that they bear fruit. That's us. All right, we're the trees who now bear fruit. And so this old commandment becomes new because it's actually shown in our lives. It grabs hold of us. God's word is now giving us new life so that we actually walk in the way that Jesus walked. And because you are new, because you have new life in Christ, this commandment is new because now you live according to that. You do love your neighbor. Again, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. This is what makes it new, is that Jesus Christ has come into the world, and Jesus actually kept the commandment. Jesus actually did love. He didn't just stand there like Moses saying, do this and don't do that. Jesus actually did it. He actually did the commandment of love by dying for us. That's the darkness passing away. That in Jesus Christ, we really see the love of God. And the true light is already shining now. And so the darkness is past. I'm going to pause there this week. And we'll pick it up there at verse 9 next week. But let me just ask, how are we doing? Any questions or comments on the things that we've heard this week? All right. Well, we'll continue in this theme next week. And John, again, he is this old preacher, and his words are profound. Every little bit that he says to us is full of the goodness of God. And both in teaching us to obey Jesus, but also to trust in his grace. Nancy, go ahead.
Verse 1. Yeah. In the New King James, it says, and if, and in the NIV, it says, but. And if is kind of like a foregone conclusion, and but says, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. That's really interesting. You point that out. I mean, yeah, it's in the Greek. I just looked at this. It's the basic conjunction in Greek, kai, very basic conjunction that can mean both. I mean, it can mean and, it can mean but, it can mean also, it can mean even, it can be and yet. And so the word itself in Greek is pretty vague about what it's saying. But I would say I do like the NRSV translation here, because John he's making a break in the thought. He's kind of saying, okay, let me show you this, but now let me show you this. That is, he is saying, first of all, I don't want you to sin. And again, I think it's really helpful to see that he begins that first verse with a term of affection for his people. My little children, he says. Again, this is like a father or even a grandfather speaking to grandkids. I love you so much. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to go and mess up your life. I don't want you to hurt each other. All right? This is a very affectionate thing he's saying. But having said that, when you do screw up, please know that you have Jesus on your side. And so I would say that the but is helpful to say that, again, there's two sort of competing thoughts, and both of them are true. I don't want you to sin. But if you do sin, please know that Jesus will not abandon you. So I think that you've really picked up on something there, Nancy. I think it's really good to see that. That word, it'll get translated different ways. And I think it's good to see that there is definitely a separation there, that John is making two points in opposition to each other. But again, both of them are true. I think people have said that the Christian faith is full of paradox. That is, it's full of things which seem to be opposite or are opposite, but are both true. And this would be one of those. I don't want you to sin. Don't sin. But if you do, you've got a gracious Lord sitting at the right hand of the Father.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good comment.
I was just going to say, I just always find so much comfort in his writing. For the fact that it's not him preaching, it's him speaking. Like this is like an old commandment. This isn't him. This is just, and it's just, I don't know, it's just the whole thing of it being before time. This is the whole, sorry. But anyway,
Yeah.
I just find so much comfort in his words.
Yeah, and you know what I thought maybe we should sing again today. And you know what hymn I want to sing? I love to tell the story. Right? I mean, the old story. It'll be my theme in glory. And again, it's this old story, but now it is new because Jesus Christ has come to us. He has revealed this all to us and made it alive in us. That apart from Christ, we were aliens to all of this. We were the outsiders, but now Jesus Christ has pulled us in. And so I think in a moment we should sing that. This is no new commandment. This is the old story that we're telling. This isn't some new fang-dangled false teaching heresy business. This is the old story.
True story.
You got it. True story. Yeah. This is a true story. Any other comments or questions? Then if you don't, why don't you grab your hymnals? If you've got one close by, go grab it. I'm going to grab mine. Hold on a second.
Diane had a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Diane, please.
I was just going to comment in this 1 John. I had written in my Bible that John really wants you to know this. There's 33 no's in the NIV.
Wow.
So John really wants us to know what he's thinking.
That's great. And when you say no, you're K-N-O-W.
Yeah, he wants you to know there's 33 no's in this book.
That's great. Diane, that's for the whole epistle, not just this chapter?
That's for the whole, I went through as the whole epistle.
Yeah, that's great.
I have them all circled, that's why.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And one of the key no's that I see in this chapter we're studying today, it comes in verse 3. John says, "By this we may be sure that we know him if we keep his commandments." I'd say that's really interesting because, what is it that John wants us to know? Well, it's not even a what, it's a who, right? There are certainly things, and there are things John wants, there are teachings, things John wants us to know and remember. But the number one thing that John would have us know is Jesus himself, to have this kind of relationship with Christ. And I think, in seminary, we would sometimes joke about this, that in the Bible, the word know can be a way of describing the sexual relationship between a husband and wife. You know that Adam knew his wife, or Abraham knew his wife. But it does speak about the intimacy of this word know, K-N-O-W, that John wants us to know Jesus, not in a sexual way, but in an intimate way. This is a relationship that John is talking about. And it's so interesting that you say that, Diane, because again, this is an epistle written against Gnosticism, and again, Gnosticism, Gnostic, gnosis, comes from the Greek word that means knowledge or to know. And so it's really interesting you point that out, because that really shows then how John is redefining the terms. He says, okay, you guys want knowledge? You want to know something? I'll show you what it means to know something. Again, I'm not going to give you a secret knowledge, but I'm going to have you know Jesus Christ, the one who died for the sins of the whole world. So that's really neat that you found that, because John is playing with the Gnostics. I mean, he's saying, okay, yeah, I'll use your terms, but I'm going to show you what they really mean with Jesus Christ. Let's talk about what it means.
And again, it's in the NIV.
Yeah.
Bible.
Yeah, you bet. That's great. Let me just do this, a quick word search. So I'm just using my online, or not online, but it's my computer has a concordance in it here. In the NRSV, it looks like that word, how many did you say in the NIV, Diane?
Well, I had a note in my Bible saying 33 notes.
Okay, yeah. And in my NRSV, I just did a search on the word know, and it also includes words like knowledge in there, and it comes up 38 times. So it's a little bit different probably from the one you're looking at. But clearly this is a big thing in this epistle. In the King James, looks like it comes up the same. Again, counting 38 times where it's know or knows or knowledge or things like that. I never realized that before, how big that word is in this little epistle. That's great. I mean, yeah, this epistle, we're looking at how many chapters here? We got 5 chapters in the epistle of John. That's a lot. That's a lot. Good stuff. Good. Any other comments or questions? Well, then grab your hymnals. I think we should sing. So we'll be singing I Love to Tell the Story, which is number 390. 390 in here. And as long as since I'm here, I'm just going to plunk it on the piano really quick. Did y'all hear that? I'll do our best here to sing, and I'm going to click mute just so we can sing together. Please feel free to sing along. Here we go. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know it's true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else would do. I love to tell the story. I'll sing this theme in glory and tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story, how pleasant to repeat what seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. I love to tell the story. I'll sing this theme in glory and tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I have to get some water. I'll be right back. We'll do verse 3. My wife heard me coming and she filled up a glass before I even got there. Thank you all for bearing with me. Let's sing verse 3. I love to tell the story, for those who know it best seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, I'll sing the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story. I'll sing this theme in glory and tell the old story of Jesus and his love. So some of us are quite literally thirsting to hear it like the rest.
Yeah, hang on. I was muted.
So thanks for singing along with me. Now I'm going to go rest my voice. Yes, it's the old story. Nothing new about this, except that again it becomes new in us. Christ is the new revelation that we've seen him in the flesh, and he now comes alive in us. So that's great. Thank you all for your contributions today, and let's close with our Lord's Prayer.
Can I ask you one question before we get started?
Yeah, please.
So you can play the piano, you can play the guitar, and you can play that flute thing. A person who can't do anything, can you play drums like on a 5-gallon bucket?
Yeah, about as well as I can play piano.
Well, I think you're pretty.
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, I took piano lessons when I was a kid. I wish I'd stuck with it. But I really can only plunk out one little hand at a time. You know, I mean, the real piano players, they can do all kinds of things. And then you throw in someone like, like Mary, who not only does all this, but then she gets her feet going with those pedals, I mean, those are the real musicians. So, no, I do love music, and I'm just kind of a hobbyist, but.
No, you're much more than a hobbyist.
Yeah, thanks, though. Thanks. It's fun. Like I said, I wish I'd stuck with piano. And I even recently for Father's Day, Katie and the kids, we dug out my old trombone, which was in my dad's basement. And for Father's Day, we took it to Schmidt Music and had it cleaned up so it would play again. So now I'm even trying to get out my trombone and learn that again. It's just, music's great. I love music.
Look forward a trombone recital.
Yeah. Mary has said we're gonna have to get me to the point where she can, use that in church and worship service sometime. So maybe next year for Easter, we'll see how quick I progress. Thanks. Great. Well, we'll say our Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right, well, happy raking, everybody. We'll rake them up and watch them fall again. So eventually they'll all be off the trees and we'll enjoy a good, nice, hearty winter. All right, thanks. We'll see you all next time. Bye.